Alright, camera's rolling. Cool. So, welcome to what I'll consider to be the first proper ride of Jaeger. So I've started things up by doing reverse off the beaten track. The infamous cross-country loop from the Skunk Works Enduro. Just because it's got a wide variety of corners of different radian surfaces. Plus it's also got a few sticks and trees to make things interesting. We're talking about Jaeger fully. We first need to acknowledge that there were some changes made, and there still are some changes to come. So one of the changes is we had to keep the 32 tooth chainring. Trek's pretty specific in specking with a 32 tooth, and we saw why, because when we had it in the shop and we saw how close the chain line is to the built-in chainstay protector, we realized that we couldn't put on a 30 tooth, otherwise it would start grinding off the plastic. So we've had to keep the 32 tooth, but we've still got our nice Shimano 10 to 51 tooth out the back. But otherwise we've got to make a few changes, because the Pirelli 29 by 2.6 weren't available yet in both the medium for the front and the aft for the rear. So for the time being, we've actually got Pirelli 29 by 2.4s to get us by, and I'm really quite happy with that, since it means I could sort of review and test these tyres until the final 2.6s come in. The other thing is that, speaking of tyres and wheels, we forgot to install the muck-off stems, so only until we bring the bike back into the shop to put on the last lot of modifications will we actually put on the proper stem. And then the final caveat is that we also need to get the grip 2 to replace the current grip. So that's because we couldn't quite spec a grip 2 as quickly as we'd like. A few troubles with the current problem, but we'll get there eventually. And for the time being, we'll just run this stock grip and just sort of see how the bike handles naturally before we start chucking some upgrades on her. Love this corner complex. In the dry and with a proper tyre like an Icon, you can really rail these corners and get some speed. But just being a bit slick at the moment and just wanting to get to grips with the bike, I don't want to quite start slamming around the corners and coming off. So as it goes for the handling of this bike, it's very nimble, and there's a whole new level of nimble when compared to the Slash 8 that I reviewed last year, where you have a carbon rim out the front and the rear, and you have a full carbon fiber chassis. So what this means is that you've reduced your central weight. Center of mass is still the same, but rather than flinging around a heavier load like with Warpath or with even Titan or the Slash 8, you have a bike that's a bit more, well, easy to change direction with, nimble, because you no longer have to change the direction and the rotational momentum of an alloy rim or with a heavier tire. So that means that throwing this into corners, especially at the last moment, it's easier to change direction. And the other thing is that with the carbon rims, they are quite stiff and they translate feeling quite well, but quite harshly. Will Barrett picked up on this for Flow Mountain Bike when he did his review for the Trek Fuel EX 9.8. They had theirs in the blue, but I don't find that it's quite harsh. I just find that it's quite stiff handling, and that's a good thing as I'm coming accustomed to it, because you no longer have the front wheel wallowing and sort of understeering. Instead, you've got immediate steering response, which is great. It is a bit of a sensation that I will have to get used to, and something that the proper enduro diehards who have been running great components for a while will probably scoff at, but when you've spent your life testing bikes that have had alloy rims, going into a proper set of carbon rims is very different. So something that I'll need to become accustomed to as the months roll on. The Pirelli Scorpions are going quite well. Even in these slightly damp conditions, I haven't felt like the wheels have slipped out or anything catastrophic has gone wrong with them, which is nice. They are quite fast rolling, and they seem to roll onto the side quite well. I have higher hopes for these than the Michelin Force XCs, and I really hope that they can go toe to toe with Maxxis, but time will tell, and we will need a more diverse range of testing trails once the current problem eases off a bit. So when I was building the bike, I had a lot of ums and ahs as to whether or not I was going to replace the SLX ball pots that came with this standard. Reason being that you think, oh well, you've got an XT drivetrain but SLX brakes. Can we do something better with XT brakes? And with the XT brakes, sure, they're lighter, they've got better heat dissipation, and you've got bite point adjustment. These SLX brakes with your reach adjustment and just being the brakes that they are pretty spot on. They could be one of the best things going on this bike at the moment. So as we're climbing up, might as well talk about the drivetrain. How do I find the Shimano XT 8100? I find this pretty awesome. Quite happy with it. It has the robust shifting performance of previous XT drivetrains. The 11 speed that I had on Titan, the 2x10 that was on the first Fuel EX I ever reviewed. It just shifts crisply, no fuss. The triggers are quite tactile. So with my thumbs being a bit greasy from so much sweat in the hands, there's no mystery as to which lever my thumb is currently pushing on and how it should respond. As always, it's quite utilitarian in its approach, which I quite like, especially with the name Jaeger meaning hunter. It's kind of good just to have a solid, reliable component that has that really tactile feel. So the geometry's pretty spot on as always. Nothing changes from my Fuel EX 8 review that I did late last year. Everything just feels pretty awesome and pretty spot on for what a trail bike should be in 2020. I do have it in the low setting at the moment. So for stuff like this where I'm doing a lot of switchback climbs, switchback descents and not many jumps or drops, maybe I should have it in the high. But it's always best just to get used to the bike in one setting, and then once I've weeded out the kinks, then I'll come back, put into the high mode like I did with the Fuel EX8 and see how it goes then. Because with the EX8 I felt like there was a lot more that could be done with it, but with only reviewing it for 2 weeks you can only do so much before you either bin it because you don't know its true limits, or you just sort of get that impression that you know everything but you haven't pushed hard enough. So as I adapt to this bike, I'll really be able to see how the high and low settings do influence the handling finally. So in terms of utility, one of the other things we're doing is that we're going to spec the 1UP EDC multi-tool into the stem, and we're just going to be putting the black top cap on it. So in a bit of time we will have a functional toolkit on us. We've got a water bottle cage that can sort of accommodate a 500ml bottle. So the rest of the riding footage was just me going around in circles, how the current problem's going to influence the test trails that we can use. But we've cleaned up Jaeger and we've brought it back into the studio where I'm currently rendering the video for it. But I just want to demonstrate the importance of actually getting one of these color palettes for the Project One. So at any Trek dealer, you can ask for one of these, but only ask for these if you're dead serious about going for a Project 1, because what you see on the Project 1 website may be representative of the bike you will get in the end. But at the same time, you look at how some of these colours might look, and then when you get the final product, you might think, well, that's not exactly what we had. Like the greens are darker, or you might have the silver isn't as metallic as what you thought. So you get your colour palette here, and you can start playing with colour combinations. You can remove them and sort of put them next to each other like you would if you were doing interior decorating. But with that colour palette, we were able to come up with the final paint job for Jaeger. Now, there's a few other nice things that I'd just like to point out while on camera. So if we come down here, one of the options within the Project 1 final customization, not on the website that you can tool around with and fantasize your dream bike, you can actually ask for the artist to sign on the frame that completed the job. So whoever this is, thank you for making my dream come true. This is absolutely beautiful. Happy that there's sort of another name to this that sort of makes it a bit more personal to not only them but to me as well, because Jaeger is essentially the evolution of Titan, as I've said numerous times. The other thing is that we've got this Dirt Surfer fender that I got down in Medina when I was down there doing the review for the Slash 8 and the Remedy 8. And I've also got a Crankalicious sticker, since they make phenomenal products. If you come down to here, it's a bit hard with the current light, there we go. You can actually see that I also got Jaeger written on the frame as well. So this is the bike's permanent name. Another thing that we were tossing up between in the shop was what colour this Fuel EX would come out as. A lot of us thought that it was actually going to come out as black, because the impression was that on the website that if you went with a dark colour or a light colour, they'll probably just print it in black. But they've actually done it in the olive grey that the main body logo is. So something to keep in mind if you ever do go ahead with the Project 1 is that whatever you have as your writing on the main body might translate to your Fuel EX, your Slash, your Top Fuel logo on the top. But it's just a really beautiful bike. And here's the chainstay tolerance problem I was telling you about. So if you could imagine that it'd almost be down to there, and we're only in the mid gear, so changing all the way down to the bottom gear might present a few problems. So otherwise, I'm just in love with this bike, just absolutely enamored by how beautiful it is, but also the fact that you can personalise the Project 1s even further if you put your mind to it. And of course, here's the olive grey grips to go with the logo, so you can kind of see a bit of colour matching. But this is essentially Jaeger as it stands. So moving forward, we will put the upgrades on it, being the 29 by 2.6 inch Pirelli Scorpions. We will eventually get the Grip 2 dampener into the fork. And finally, we will get the muck-off stems, because I feel that those muck-off stems will just add a bit more colour and pop to it, but not be too much. So thank you for watching, and keep riding and stay awesome.